understand their concern. What I don't understand is the way they dealt with the issue. Look, we need all that stuff gone. Oh, and by the way, we want new offices open tomorrow. So just throw something up there so we can get our offices back open. And it was perfect. So, north end, south end. From one end to the other, the lower level where you see all the stone, that's Mercado or Market, that's where we were. That's now restaurants and retail, but initially it was just this incredibly ratty brick hallway with a bad floor, an occasional door that went into storage where all those shops are, none of the fancy wrought iron gates, none of the windows, none of that, just a simple 5-panel maple door that went into storage, and then suspended from the ceiling down there running straight down the hallway with these enormous steam pipes. So it was plenty unpleasant down there. Literally a rat hole, way, way, way too hot. So the first floor here on the south end now is all commercial spaces. Top 2 and sometimes 3 floors at this end are condominiums. And they range from modest, just 300 square feet, to luxury over 3,000. So there's some big ones in there. Just to the right of the eyesore here, this is now 39 affordable housing apartments, subsidized. There are additional subsidized apartments out back where some of the other buildings have been restored, and there will be more as they continue with the restoration. The balance of the north end was completed by a company named Cordia, and they specialize in senior living facilities. It's now 110 high-end senior apartments. So if you're of the means and a senior, that's a pretty dandy place to live. The apartments are gorgeous. They have their own restaurant. They have their own movie theater. They have their own pub. Get me in there, I'm never leaving. What you see north of us here, this is the Pavilions, which is one of the most desirable continuous care facilities in the state of Michigan. Beyond it, the big building you see, that's the parking garage for Munson Medical Center. All of that ground used to be part of this. At one point, there were 97 buildings on this campus. But as they began to expand, they tore well over half of them down out in the northeast corner out here. Now, most of them were post-1900, but there were a number of them that were this Markham brick. So when they tore them down, they saved the brick. Now, as they're out back here restoring these buildings, they can replace that spalling brick with some of the original, which hasn't been around for over 100 years. So that's sort of cool. The space we're standing in here at one point was the most diverse arboretum in the state of Michigan. Dr. Munson and his wife travel extensively all over the United States and the world, and wherever they went, they brought back trees and they planted them here. I spent a number of days in the 6th grade for science class. We were identifying trees we were never going to find anyplace else in the state of Michigan. And when you're in the 6th grade, that's about the coolest thing ever. By the 7th grade, they're bringing us inside on wards with patients present. Yeah, try and get a parent to sign a release form for that today. They were just trying to normalize this place. So they had plenty of people that lived here that every day went to work for some company here in Traverse City. Work is therapy. So there was a release program, so a lot of these folks were going to work in Traverse City. So they said, we're sharing our patients with you. Why don't you come on in and take a look at what's going on? Now, you're going to win over a certain percentage of the population here. Yes, it's a magnificent facility. We understand you're doing remarkable things to help these folks. There's always going to be that hardcore group that no matter what you say or do, they are not moving off the schneid. Well, come on in. Take a look at what's going on. We'll gladly show you what we're doing here. You kidding me? I'm not going in there. That's a hellhole. You're torturing people in there. All right, then, we'll bring your kids in. Let them go home and explain to mom and dad, look, it's not this horrifying, terrible, insane asylum you have in your head from some bad movie. There's something sort of interesting going on there. And I'll tell you, as a 12-year-old kid, you step onto one of these wards and just watch these people's faces light up. You haven't done anything. Just your presence is enough to make their day. How can that possibly be a bad thing? It's not. I mean, I also continued, I was in here quite a bit when I was a kid because both my folks were educators here in the school system, and they were in and out of here, so I came with them. I also continued to come throughout high school because I came with the choir, the band, the drama group. We came in and entertained these folks on a somewhat regular basis. Now, they brought us onto women's wards, and there's always a certain percentage of the population on the ward that's older ladies, grandmas. We're like their long-lost grandkids. We can do no wrong. There were points where they wanted to keep some of us. the littler, cuter ones. They never picked me. I've been damaged ever since then. Oh, shucks. But I mean, that was the last thing they want is people driving by the street out here, pointing at this place with a sneer on their lips, talking about that insane asylum. So if they can normalize it as much as possible by exposing as many people to it as possible, then it becomes much easier for them to do their business without people thinking evil thoughts about the place. The one thing that was probably of the most benefit to the folks who came into the asylum system was the socialization. Because you have to understand, the vast majority of these folks have no social skills whatsoever. And this is going to be crucial to their eventually being able to walk away from here, because this is the plan now. It's not to keep them forever. This is return them to society, where an awful lot of them can lead some sort of productive life outside of here. Most of these folks have been locked in attics, basements. A lot of them, when they first got here, didn't even know how to speak because their families so rarely spoke to them. So now they're here on a ward with fellow patients, staff, or they're working in any number of different environments here side by side with each other. It is inevitable. They're going to begin to develop some sort of social skills. And it was the staff's job here to make sure those skills were headed in the right direction. Because like I said, ultimately this is going to be the thing they're going to need to be able to eventually walk away from this place, dealing with other people. And they were very, very successful in doing that. In its 104 years of operation, it closed in 1989, tens of thousands of patients passed through this facility, and at the end there were less than 100. So they're doing something right. Pretty remarkable. So we're going to head back inside next.
My legs don't want to move.
There's an elevator straight up to the next floor. You'll be there.
That's the original floor
Yeah.
from that picture right there.
Isn't that cool?
I suddenly become a member of the wedding party, and I would have dressed better. So, now, this place was never fenced because of the way they were treated. The only fencing that was here is out here we see these parking lots. They had wrought iron fencing around them so they could let the patients out here to wander around and hang out in the fresh air and the sunlight. Lots of shade trees, lots of places for them to sit. If they needed to pace, go ahead and pace to your heart's content. That was the only fencing, but the establishment itself was never fenced. But they would wander occasionally. I had plenty of friends that lived in the neighborhood north of here, and almost every one of them had some sort of story about something that happened. I had a woman on one of my tours 2 years ago. She said, I was home for the summer, I was 8 years old. I was home for the summer with my mom, and all throughout that whole summer, all of a sudden I would hear my mother call out from another part of the, So she's home with her mother. Throughout that summer, all of a sudden she'd hear her mother call out to her from another part of the house, Judy's here. And she would go to the front door, open the front door, sure enough there's Judy standing out at the end of their sidewalk looking at all the big, green, beautiful trees and the nice houses and stuff. And she would go out there, take her by her hand and bring her back home here. Wedding upstairs, take the elevator.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So there was that kind of stuff that went on. Did you get that one's locked.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
So we had a lot of that, a benevolent relationship, interaction with a lot of these patients. We had the exact opposite as well, but thankfully the good far outweighed the bad. Now living here in building 50, the closer you lived to the center here, this meant the closer you were to being able to walk away from this place. And the further out you got on each wing, the more dire your mental circumstances were. So by the time you get to the far end, the two outermost wings on this building were the most disturbed wards. These are folks, they didn't have a clue how to help. You have to remember, back then, there's no medication, there's no psychology, there's no psychologists. I mean, this is all, what's going on within the asylum system is a grand experiment. We're going to try and deal with these people in all these different ways and see what seems to work. And these folks are just, they're incredibly volatile. Out of nowhere, they could just go off. And then they're dangerous. They're really, really rambunctious. So about the only thing they could figure to do with these folks was, we're just going to hang on to them and take care of them until something comes along that enables us to be able to help them better than we can right now. You guys, there's an elevator over here too, or the staircase. They'll both take you to the next floor where the wedding is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Usually doesn't cool inside like this. Usually I miss them by a few minutes. Now, when a patient was first admitted here, they were only allowed to bring so many pairs of underwear, so many pairs of socks. They were given a whole list, one nice set of clothes. And that nice set of clothes was reserved for the days they took them outside of here on some sort of day trip, which they did on a regular basis, whether it was an educational experience for them. When I was a kid, every single day down on Front Street, you got 10 to 20 people from this place milling around downtown with a bunch of eggs. We're just showing what the outside world is all about. So this doesn't become an entire reality. Because that's the goal now, for them to wind up out there. So rather than it's time for you to go, surprise, we're going to introduce you to that world a few hours at a time over several days long, until the end. When this place closed in 1989, the homeless population in Traverse City exploded. There were less than 100 patients here by that point, but they've been releasing others leading up to that. When this place finally shut down completely, they simply showed them the door and wished them good luck. There was absolutely no aftercare. The federal government was supposed to take over. It had been decided we're going to close all of these state-run hospitals. You can take the elevator up to the next floor. You come to the wedding?
Yeah.
Okay. The federal government was supposed to develop a plan. So the states were off, it was going to be community-based. But they missed the mark. So now all of a sudden we got dozens of these poor lost souls downtown on Front Street who don't have a clue what's going on. They had patients coming back here, knocking on the door, wanting to be let back inside. The mental health industry dropped the ball big time on this. The 70s and 80s was a period that was known as deinstitutionalization. And it was at this point that all the powers that be within the mental health industry, psychiatrists, everybody sort of got together and decided, well, we need to get them out of there. It's not good for them. They changed their whole tune about the asylum system. And it also coincides. Jog, another straight shot, another jog, another straight shot, a jog, etc., etc. This served a number of different purposes. One, it allowed them to have additional patients. Just as importantly, add hundreds of additional windows. One of the rules here was every patient must have a view to the outside. That's why there's so many windows in all of these buildings. It now allows them also to be able to capture sunlight from multiple directions. Not just a western exposure, they can get sun from the north, from the west, from the south. As much sun into these buildings as possible. That was the idea. This building here and that one right over there were infirmaries, also known as receiving buildings. They housed mostly patients with infectious diseases like tuberculosis. In the beginning, you didn't need to just be mentally ill to be institutionalized here. If you had syphilis, TB, epilepsy, polio, sometimes blindness or deafness, alcoholism, postpartum depression, hysteria, excessive worrying, which I guess we'd call anxiety today. If you're a businessman and suffered a business failure, depression, which they didn't know how to diagnose, wantonness. There were far too many women who found themselves in one of these places simply because when they began menopause and started to act differently, their husbands had them committed. Wasn't so funny to them, I'll tell you. I used to talk about all a husband needed to do was fill out a form. I'm doing a tour, I have a guy raise his hand. Like an idiot, I called on him, and he asked me if I had any of those forms. This guy's wife stayed as far away from him as she possibly could for the rest of the tour, and I gotta believe he's still begging. Because she didn't think it was cute at all, not at all.
That little building right there says fire department.
This was the first facility of any kind built by the state of Michigan to include electricity.
The bakery.
It wasn't some government building downstate, it was this asylum way up north here. So this was in the midst of the big debate. What kind of electricity are we going to use here in America? Is it going to be Edison's direct current or Tesla's alternate current? Thomas Edison and Henry Ford were friends who used to go up here to vacation. That's why this place has electricity. Look at the size of it. It's Edison's perfect opportunity to showcase his direct current. We can really show him how well this is going to work. Well, we're all on alternate current now, but at least he gave it a shot. Initially, they did use electricity here in a chamber that sits below ground over here that was the hub for the steam pipe tunnel system. And above it was this enormous coal-burning power plant. In that tunnel were a number of in that chamber were a number of very, very large fan towers, which is what they needed the electricity for. They blew the superheated air through the tunnels along with the steam pipes. The outside walls on building 50 are 27.5 inches thick. And there were places where there were voids between the inside wall and the outside wall. So those fans are blowing that superheated air up that void. And on the walls were a series of openings that looked like giant cartoon mouse holes. This was my asthma theory. This is the point at which doctors were pretty much convinced that a lot of our maladies stemmed from bad air. So as that hot air rushed by those openings, it sucked the air out of the wards into the walls. It was then pushed up into the attic, piped to these steeples, forced up the steeples, and out all four sides onto the cap. Those are now glassed in, but originally they were wide open with hot, stinky air pouring out of there. And in the original blueprints, these are now referred to as spires or steeples. They're ventilators, because it was all part of this air exchange system that was built into the building when it was initially built. Pretty incredible. So the street here is Gray Drive. They named all the streets on the campus after colors. So they could then paint the street sign the same color as the name, and even if you were illiterate or foreign, you could still find your way around. If you're colorblind on top of it, apparently you just wandered aimlessly. I don't know, orange, green, I can't tell. This drives me crazy! We're headed across the street next.
Did you see the fire department over there? Look.
The bakery.
The bakery was a fire department.
Oh, wow.
Look how small it is too. Isn't that funny?
So the old center, where the hole is now, the old center and Gray Drive here were the dividing line between the women's and the men's portions of this facility. A little bit about our numbering system here. All of the men's wards, the cottages, the buildings, they were all even numbered, all the women's were odd numbered. Thank you. I had a woman jump on this on one of my tours, and she was so quick she just stunned me. Hey, all but one prime numbers are also odd, buddy boy, and it means we get to be number one. Just don't hurt me, please. Stating a fact. I'm not for this or against it. So beneath Gray Drive here are these enormous coal hoppers. They run 20 feet deep. This initially was a rail line that came in here to service that big power plant that was sitting here. And they pull in rail car after car, line them up over the manhole covers and dump coal for hours. You can actually see this used to be a railroad track going across here.
Oh, wow. Right there.
But it came in through here.
Yeah.
Another section of the building. That's because the track is still under this. They burned 6.5 tons of coal per day, which is a huge pile of coal before they got this storage system. They just sat in a big pile outside of that power plant. And people, at night, people from Traverse City would load up in buckets and stuff. Of course they did. Well, guess what? It's under railroad tracks now. You're going to have to buy your own coal. The little foundation you see across the street here, that was the original laundry. Big building back behind it there, that was the second laundry, building 53. It was built in 1956, which explains why it looks exactly like a 1950s grade school. They all looked exactly like that. Back here, a little yellow building with a red door. That was the first fire department, built in 1890. They had their own fire department here. In 1928, they finally purchased their first motorized fire engine. And it was too big to park in that building. So they had to come out here and build this one. This now uses amazing built right into the buildings, wood burning up to make their bakeries. So now, in a little ironic twist, every day in the fire department, they start a fire. Okay. That then became the potato and vegetable peeling building. Goes from a fire department to a vegetable peeling building. Not much of a come down there. Building kitty corner across the street here, 61. That was the arts and crafts building. Eventually it became the occupational therapy building. Across the street here we have the warehouse. So they complete building 50 in 1885, and almost immediately they got almost 300 patients from those two asylums downstate that were overcrowded, both of which were also Kirkwoodized. So from the jump, that's over half full. And it didn't take very long to realize we're going to need a lot more housing. So they started to build these buildings they called cottages. This series of cottages became known as the colony system. The women's cottages they built directly north of building 50. All right, so this was the chamber. This was the hub for the steam pipe tunnel system. From this point, all pipes and tunnels radiated, and above us was that enormous coal-burning power plant. If you look against the far wall back here on the right, you'll see a piece of plywood. Somebody got it. Piece of plywood. That's another tunnel that goes out to where the laundry buildings and so on are located. Back here near the ceiling, this is one of the original steam pipes. Now the tunnel I'm going to take you into next carried 6 of those. So there were never any people in this tunnel we're going into. It was strictly steam pipes. You get within 8 or 10 inches of one of those things and it blisters your skin. So a half a dozen in here with patients or staff, no. Strictly steam pipes. To get to our tunnel, we have to go down this short hallway here, which is short not only in length, but this is it. So, watch it. There's a few of us. I know this doesn't apply to the vast majority of you. I don't want to hear word one out of you guys, okay? My head is so dented. At the end is a staircase. You're going to step down 2 wooden steps. Your third step will place you in the floor of the tunnel. It is concave. So be careful going off that last step because that wall that you see there is covered with the skin of people's foreheads, so I've underestimated this floor. So just giving you a heads up here. With the last person out, please close the door behind themselves. Let's do this.
Neat.
Oh, wow.
Oh, sweet.
That is so cool.
Oh,
Cool bean.
yeah.
Cool bean.
Cool bean.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is cool. Sweet.
Let's also get some people going right here and just stop at that corner.
Why does it look like there's somebody standing down here?
You got to view the same way, 200 feet down the tunnel there.
My God.
Couple more to the left, and then we'll take the rest of it to the right here. So this tunnel was completed in 1883, 2 years prior to Building 50 being done, and it does not run all over under Traverse City. We have a lot of people that break in here thinking they're going to wind up downtown. But you get right down there where it turns dark, that's the end. And they get all ticked off and start tearing stuff apart at that point. So, no, this does not go. I had a couple who was on my tour who tried to convince me, oh yeah, we came from all the way downtown out to here and wound up here. No, you did not. Or whatever it was you were taking, I'd like some, because apparently that was pretty good stuff. So, so the way you dig, or the way you build one of these tunnels, by the way, this is the same tunnel that is beneath Ferris in the catacombs. It's the exact same tunnel that's in every sewer system in Europe. You dig a trench, then you get in the trench and you build what is known as a slit form out of wood. It is the size and shape of the tunnel. Then the masons get in the trench on the outside of the form, lay the brick over the top of it, and then once that's set up, you come in and you strike all the wood, you got yourself a tunnel. The reason the floor is shaped this way, these being steam pipes, the walls, ceilings, everything ran with water, condensation. This collects it at the very lowest point in the center of the floor. Every few feet is one of these round spots right here with no brick, and the water just eventually seeps back into the ground underneath. Clever. So, the engineering required to build Building 50 in these tunnels was pretty much state-of-the-art. The approach to care was definitely state-of-the-art. For a very, very, very long time, this was a really, really big deal. So, what I like to do at this point is I have you arrange yourselves in a straight line across the width of the tunnel. You face down the long way down the tunnel. I'm going to turn all the lights out. You start taking constant flash photography, and this is when the weird stuff shows up.
No.
So just go ahead, come on